So if you aren't familiar with this law that was passed in Scotland, this hate crime legislation that they passed, anyone deemed to have been verbally abusive in person or online to a transgender person, including quote unquote insulting them, could be hit with a prison sentence of up to 7 years. This is from Paul Joseph Watson at modernity.news. And this legislation is terribly disturbing, and at least the United States has not gone this far off the deep end. But apparently it's causing massive problems for the police there. Once this legislation was passed, the system has been abused to pursue personal and political vendettas. Police Scotland has been deluged with vexatious and politically driven hate crime reports, with one top official complaining, "We cannot cope." Apparently, out of 8,000 reports that police have received in Scotland under the new hate crime law, less than 1% are leading to investigations. Police Scotland are having to pay officers in their control room hundreds of thousands in overtime to deal with the onslaught of frivolous reports. 800 new investigations in a single week for a police force that has already stretched its resources. And while this is a dramatic example of what can happen when the government is allowed to enact such ridiculous measures, I think it's important to talk about this some, because they're calling it a hate crime, but it's really a hate speech crime law, a hate speech law. Okay, and there's a difference, and I'd like to dive into that a little bit. First of all, in the United States, under current law, this cannot fly. You cannot have a law where it's going to say that anyone that someone can be prosecuted for simply saying something, unless there's some tie to violence, that they're trying to incite violence, as we've heard that used against the Orange Man. I'm not saying that I agree with that. I'm just saying that seems to be where the line is drawn in the United States. So it simply can't be based on words alone. It has to look like there's something else, at least a little bit more than just words. Not much else, but still. Take a look at the DOJ's website on hate crimes. The DOJ explains what a hate crime is. A hate crime has two components to it: a crime and hate. The hate, as the DOJ says, used in the hate crime context, it does not mean rage, anger, or general dislike. In this context, hate means bias against people or groups with specific characteristics that are defined by the law. At the federal level, hate crime laws include crimes committed on the basis of the victim's perceived or actual race, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. And then the second component is a crime. The crime in a hate crime is often a violent crime, such as assault, murder, arson, vandalism, or threats to commit such crimes. It may also cover conspiring or asking another person to commit such crimes, even if the crime was never carried out. And they put in bold that under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, people cannot be prosecuted simply for their beliefs. People may be offended or upset about beliefs that are untrue or based upon false stereotypes, but it is not a crime to express offensive beliefs or to join with others who share such views. This is the part where it gets a little disturbing. However, the First Amendment does not protect against committing a crime just because the conduct is rooted in philosophical beliefs. That's true. I have a beef with this that I'd like to go into briefly, and that is that this legislation is not necessary. There is nothing that prevents prosecutors from presenting evidence that the criminal actor, that the accused acted out of the type of hate that's defined here based on some characteristic like the color of somebody's skin or their ethnicity, their gender, etc. There's also nothing preventing prosecutors from arguing to a judge at sentencing for people who've been convicted that this is something that can be considered in aggravation of sentencing. And in my opinion, the hate crime legislation that does exist in the United States is really a thin wedge to get to where Scotland has gone, which is off the deep end. They've gone off a cliff at this point because they are basically outlawing speech. And they are creating a special class of persons as well who have a privilege. Just like a king, royalty in the olden days, if you said the wrong thing to the king, you were in serious trouble. And actually, that does exist in some parts of the world still. That is a violation of the fundamental human right to free speech. It is not something that is bestowed upon people through legislation or through the U.S. Constitution or any other organizing document for any government. It is a right that people possess by the fact that they are human beings. And any restriction on that is oppressive and a violation of their fundamental human right. And it should be no surprise that it's being abused in Scotland. But again, like I said, the reason why I wanted to point it out is because this law actually exists. And make no mistake, there are people working very hard to bring it to a government, to a jurisdiction near you.